Hey everyone. Well, it's spoopy season, and I hope you're having a fantastic October. That being said, I've got 3 spooky stories. Spooky, scary stories send shivers down your spine. Okay, that's enough of that. Anyways, I've got 3 spine-chilling stories from the front page of the internet itself, good ol' Reddit. So sit back, pour yourself a drink, munch a lunch on some popcorn, and without further ado, let's get right into it.
Number 1.
To begin, I think I should explain to some readers the difference between the deep web and the dark web. The deep web is a place that is accessible online by the use of special web browsers, such as Tor, and contains less than legal things such as drugs, human trafficking, and hitmen for hire. The dark web is pretty much everything that is no longer available by conventional means, such as military websites that have not been incorporated into the current internet architecture. With that in mind, I would like to convey you my story of my accidental journey into the unknown space known as the dark web. I'm a computer technician by profession. I work for a company that is contracted by local businesses and private consumers to set up internet connections, install software, and repair any sort of computer problems that they come up with. So, naturally, I get all kinds of crazy stories and problems that these people come up with. I swear some of these people just don't know how to operate a computer, even in this day and age. Anyway, I get a call from a local business complaining that their internet is acting up and they must have a virus. So I shake my head, thinking that someone just unplugged a network cable or downloaded a Trojan horse accidentally, and I get up and I drive over to the address in question. As soon as I arrive, the man who called me immediately spots me and starts going on and on about hackers and how much he hates Microsoft Windows and how many viruses it creates and all that jazz that I usually receive when addressing business problems. He leads me to his computer and I pull out my laptop and I sit down in front of it and begin to work. He tells me, "Good luck," and walks away to do whatever he does. I open up the browser. He uses Internet Explorer, no surprise, and it opens up to an About Blank page. So, I try connecting to Google.com. 404 error. Alright, well, I know that Google.com definitely exists, so there's a problem with his internet connection. I open up his network sharing center to see if I could use the built-in troubleshooter to diagnose the problem. But I give myself a well-deserved facepalm to see that he isn't even connected to any network at all. So I search for networks and find a few wireless connections for him to connect to. They're all WEP encrypted, and I'm almost positive that he doesn't know the key. So I break out my laptop and run a WEP cracking tool to get his computer up and running again. As I'm waiting for my tool to find the WEP key, another network suddenly shows up on my computer. This is one of those unprotected networks with an SSID consisting of a random hexadecimal stream. Now, I'm extremely bored and waiting for this guy to return, so I decide to connect to it and take a little around and see where it was coming from. I connect without problems, and I open up my toolkit of cracking tools to see if I can find the source for this connection. As I'm having my fun, hacking away at this unprotected network, my computer freezes up, albeit for only a second or two. But this doesn't happen much, and it caught me by surprise. So I shrugged it off as the poor internet connection speed here and kept on going. A few minutes later, it happened again, and a few minutes after that, once again. Each time getting longer and longer. Weird, I thought to myself. What's with this network? It was then that things were going to get really interesting. After a long string of pauses, my screen flickered in and out a bit. And then, out of nowhere, my browser opened up by itself. Now, I was worried that I had somehow infected my computer with some kind of malware by connecting to this network, and I proceeded to close the browser and began to disconnect from the network before anything worse could happen. But I couldn't disconnect. No matter how many times I clicked the little disconnect button, my computer didn't respond, despite everything else on my screen running fine. Fuck. I thought to myself, this is gonna be a long day. And just as I was about to hit the power button on my laptop and perform a hard reset, my browser opened again. This time with a little chat box that opened that read,
Hello.
I stared at my screen for a couple seconds, not quite sure what was going on.
I want to talk to you.
Now, I had heard about these AI programs that have these pre-programmed responses to simulate conversation with people, and at first I wasn't impressed. A nasty virus, but still wasn't impressed.
You need to leave this network now. This is your last warning.
Maybe an automated security program designed to keep hackers out? Now I have to admit I was actually becoming impressed with it. Never seen anything like this before.
I'm telling you one last time. Leave now.
I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I responded to the program. Or what? The next response scared me more than anything in this world ever has. The program began listing information about me, my name, address, telephone number, credit card information, my parents' names, their addresses. My heart sank into my chest and all the color immediately left my face. I couldn't move. I just sat there, paralyzed with fear. But what goes on to happen is even worse.
Don't look at me like that.
It was then when my webcam light turned on.
You really shouldn't stare, buddy. You might see something you'll regret.
Suddenly, the most horrifying images you could ever imagine flashed on my screen. Images of disemboweled humans, human sacrifice, detached limbs, cannibals eating people, video clips of mass suicides and firing lines. My heart was racing. My body was shaking in utter fear as the images I was being shown. They are seared in my brain. These things are things no one should see. I mustered the strength and hit the power button on my computer and slammed it shut. I ran to the bathroom and threw up a couple of times. I was drenched in sweat. I could barely compose myself. It took me about 20 minutes to get back to my computer, and even then I had a hard time getting near it. I looked over at my client's computer, and it was connected to the wireless network I was cracking earlier. It was working fine now. Just then, my client returned and thanked me for fixing his internet. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my laptop and left. After I had left the building and drove back to my office, I promptly gave my laptop to my boss, telling him that it had become non-functional and that I required a replacement. I told him someone accidentally spilled coffee on it during my last trip and it short-circuited. In reality, I made a pit stop on my way back to a hardware store and bought the most powerful magnet I could buy and ran over the hard drive several times. I wasn't risking that thing ever turning on again.
Number 2.
Oh, you youngsters with your "she embarrassed me" stories. Sit down, listen, and learn. There's crazy. And then there's crazy. There was this one girl, let's just call her BCC, bat crap crazy. She was hot. And I mean, like, wow, what is this girl doing with me type of hot. Long legs, perky breasts, a beautiful face, and a body that just would not quit. We started hanging out as just friends, watching TV and dinner every once in a while. She was flirty, a little quirky, and kept doing things to make me uncomfortable. Throwing her leg over mine, resting her hand on my upper thigh, flirty. One night, it progressed to sex. Out of nowhere. And let me tell you, it was mind-blowing. She was an animal. It was amazing. This led to days and days of sex. No dating. Just sex. You might be thinking this is a dream come true, but after a while, to tell you the truth, the passion was fading. She was still hot, and the sex was out of this world. But she was also self-centered, vapid, and kind of boring. She had no ambition in life and was always asking for or demanding stuff. After a few months, did I say the sex was great? Don't know if I did. But I decided to break it off. I said that we could still be friends, but I wanted more in a relationship than just sex. She calmly looked at me and said,
Okay, If that's the way you want it.
And then I left her house. I was smiling and confident in the mature way I ended the relationship because, to be honest, I was a little concerned how she would handle it. I had seen flashes of crazy, but it all worked out in the end. Or so I thought. The next day, she calls and says that she wants a real relationship with me. I'm a little pissed, and as I had already ended it once and for all, and now I had to tell her again. So I politely said, no, this is for the best. To which she informed me that I had no choice in the matter. We were dating. End of story. I explained to her this is not how this works, but she laughed and said,
Too late.
and hung up. So I go to work. This crazy girl calls me at work to ask about our relationship. Not once, not twice, but non-stop. I mean, I would hang up, and as the phone would hit the cradle, it would begin to ring again. I yelled, I pleaded, I got angry, I threatened police. Nothing worked. The company blocked her number. And this is when calls from other numbers started to roll in. After 2 days of this, I asked to see her in person and settle all of this. She agreed. We met. I went off, yelled, called her a child, etc. She just sat there with a stupid smile on her face. There were no more calls that day. That is when she started coming into work to see me. The first time she said,
I need to apologize for my behavior. Can we talk for 5 minutes?
and I was like, oh, thank God this is gonna be over. Nope. The second we were in my office, I left the door wide open, of course, and she was on her knees trying to undo my pants. This was her apology. I physically had to throw her out. She came back every day, sometimes 3 times a day. We had to get a trespass warrant against her. Then, 3 days after I get a call from her sister, she said that BCC was out walking, trying to come to my place, and then she was attacked and on the way over. At this point, I'm not believing anything. I, of course, tell her to call the police. She says,
All she wants is to see you. She feels safe with you and she needs to talk.
I refuse. The next day, I am told by her sister that BCC tried to commit suicide. Now, no matter how much I was over this girl, I never wanted to see her pushed to that point. Her sister asked if I could come over and say hi. I was an idiot. I believed her. When I got there, BCC answers the door in thigh highs, a corset, high heel boots, and nothing else. I turned and almost ran to my car. So she was raped a few days ago, tried to off herself, and this is how the door was answered? That is when the whole I was raped turned into I raped her. She told her friends, family, work, everyone that would listen that I did this to her. She never told the police, of course, because she knew it would quickly turn against her with all the millions of calls and texts, etc. So I threatened lawsuits. And then she moved out of the country with her family. Thank God. But the calls continued, at least once a month for, now get this, 7 years. She was in another country, 7 years, and she was still harassing me. However, due to the distance and infrequency of the calls, emails, and texts, I was able to ignore her. Until one day, when I got to work and she was there, she was pissed. She started screaming at me in the middle of the parking lot about how I stole her life from her and she waited to have children with me and now it was getting too late. I owed her a child. I'm sure I sat there with a gobsmacked look on my face. I owed her a child. She demanded that we go in right now and try to conceive one. I wish to God I was making this up, but no, it's true. I finally lost my temper. I mean, lost it. I grabbed her by the collar of her shirt, pushed her back into the car, and screamed at her to never talk to me again. ever. Our faces were close. I was red-faced and furious. And then I saw in her eyes a look like hunger. She tried to lean in and kiss me. And let me tell you, boys and girls, at this point, I was afraid of her. The look in her eyes. She was not all there. And there was nothing she wouldn't do to get what she wanted. Nothing. I could have broken her arm at that moment and she would have taken it as foreplay. I went inside, called the police, and then looked up, found, and called her mother. It seems they had to move back to the States. We have a long chat about her. I explained everything, and she said in a soft voice,
I know, she has issues.
She was institutionalized shortly after that, and I have not heard from her since. But let me tell you, I am still waiting to turn a corner or answer a phone and have her there. I hope she got the help she needed, but I hope she never, ever bothers me again. Do not stick your dick in crazy. It is not worth it no matter how great the sex is.
Number 3.
This story is written from the perspective of a woman. This is the story of how a creepy encounter with a scary man at a harbor cafe saved me from something even more terrifying. It was the autumn of 1994, and I was 19 years old. At the time, my dad had been working for almost 6 months abroad, and I was planning a surprise visit. My dad and I have always been close. I am an only child, and my mother died from cancer when I was still a baby. So it was just my dad and I, really. A tiny little family, but he made up for it by being the most awesome parent ever. Now that I wasn't a kid anymore, I appreciated that more and more. I had booked the ticket and was ready to go. It was going to be great fun to surprise him with a visit. I had to take the ferry though, and I had just gotten my driving license and I felt really unhappy about having to drive my little car on board the ferry, and decided not to bring the car at all, and I could just rent one once I got to where my dad was. Having time to spend, I decided to have coffee at a nearby cafe. Since I was early, they really hadn't started letting people onto the ferry just yet. At the cafe, there were lots of truck drivers, and I soon realized I was the only woman there. One man, a 40-ish bloke with blue eyes and tattoos all over, was eyeing me from across the room. Just something about him made my skin crawl. I got up to leave, feeling suddenly very uncomfortable, and to my utter horror, he followed. What do I do now? I asked myself. This was before everyone owned a cell phone, I might add. I decided to try and look busy and maybe he would leave me alone. So I pulled out my ticket and tried to look like I was reading it carefully, when suddenly he snatched it from my hand and said,
I'm on the same boat, and I'll have hours of your company then. How lovely.
In a voice that was an absurd combination of jovial flattery and hidden hostility. I felt it very strongly that if I got on that boat with this man who now knew my booking details, I'd be in grave danger. I can't explain why the feeling was so overwhelming, but it was. I decided there and then to not get on the boat. The ticket was cheap anyway, and I could just get on another ride instead. I hid in the ladies' room until I knew the ferry had left, and then I could safely rebook my ticket. The story could have ended there, a creepy encounter with a stalkerish man, but it doesn't. I was right in my assumption that getting on that ferry would have been unbelievably dangerous. In case you haven't figured it out yet, the date was September 28th, 1994. The name of the ship was MS Estonia. And that cold night, an accident occurred and she sank into the Baltic Sea, taking 852 people with her, resulting in the worst ferry catastrophe to strike Sweden to this day. Wow, I'm not gonna lie, that last story threw me through a loop.
I spent a little bit of time on the Google, and sure enough, it transpired on that date. And I was practically today years old when I'd even heard of this. You would think a tragedy of this magnitude would at least garner more attention or occasionally be brought up, but alas, like I said, this was the first time I heard about it. Apparently, a bad storm occurred on the ship's route, and some lower loading doors had burst open and deck started flooding, and the weight of the water ended up pulling the ship down into the depths of the Baltic Sea. I'll link a few articles in the description, and what's even crazier is, like, not only did this woman avoid being violated and or killed by some creep, but just altogether avoided a major catastrophe. Like, the word luck does not even scratch the surface. Anyway, that's about all the time I have for you. Have a happy Halloween, and stay awkward.